Minasan, konnichiwa, Zamurai Engineer desu. So in this video, let us resume our discussion on Formworks and Falseworks. So we already done these things up to certain slide. Let's go back to the last slide last week. So this is our last slide last week. So let us continue and resume our discussion on this slide. So we are now currently discussing about vertical type of forms. So in our local dialect, again, ang tawag natin dito is forma. Okay? Paglalagay ng forma. Sabi ng karpintero, lagyan ng forma bago lagyan ng concrete. No? Bago buhusan ng concrete. So that's what we always hear using our own dialect. So vertical forms are actually for walls, columns, piers, abutments, beam sides, and other vertical concrete surfaces. So we are actually using what? ACI 347 series of 2003. That is our standard. So vertical form, example, retaining wall, of course. This is for vertical. When we say vertical formworks, the formworks itself are put and set up in a vertical manner, like as you can see right now on your monitor. So this portion is actually our formwork, and this supporting post or supporting diagonal structures, they are what we call Falseworks. Okay. So we are following what? The ACI 347 standard. So same is true when we are going to set up a formworks for side wall or abutments, for bridges. So those are vertical. What about horizontal? We also have horizontal. Actually, there are more horizontal formworks than vertical formworks. So again, using the definition of ECI 347, formwork is a total system of support for freshly placed concrete, okay, including the mold or sheeting that contacts the concrete and all supporting members, hardware, and necessary bracing. Formworks includes falsework. So all of those things that supports, that temporarily supports, we call formworks. And specifically those not in contact with the concrete, those are falsework. Okay. However, again, in our local dialect, we call all of those things as forma. Forma ang tawag natin doon. Okay? So, these are the series of examples wherein we can associate ourselves with horizontal forms. For example, metal bridge decking. So, you can see here, this portion which reflects light, these are the decking. Okay? And supported by what? Beam. Another example for overhang portion of bridges. So we have what? This is the stringer. This big beam actually is what we call stringer. So as you can see, this form part of this is now the falsework. Okay. And as you can notice from many of these examples, Formworks and Falseworks cost so much. They are expensive. Actually, you are going to what? Construct many of this shape, and this shape will only be for the use of bridge overhang. Cannot be used in other application. Okay, so that's why it is very costly. So although concrete structure are the most economical, we have the formworks and falsework that must be added to the cost. Okay, somehow it evens up if compared to steel structure. So that's why we have to learn about these extra topics. Okay. Another example again of bridge overhang, cantilevered beams. This time we have cantilever, and because it is cantilever, the more it is needing of falsework and formworks. So again, the most famous picture of formwork versus falsework. All of these are formwork, and this portion, these are the falsework. Okay, these are the falsework, and over this arc, they will have what? The flat surface for the introduction of wet concrete. So what do we have here? Pressure. So falsework and formworks, what? Feel the pressure because they support it. They support the load. They support the actually temporary load up to the point that the structure itself can support its own weight or its own load. Pressure. So vertical forms are designed to assist pressure. Form pressure is affected by concrete mix, the rate of placement, the temperature of the concrete, and the weight of the concrete itself. So it is the most important factor, weight of the concrete, particularly if it's still uncured or wet, still wet. Of course, there is some factor due to temperature and how fast you introduce the because nowadays we have faster introduction of wet concrete or fluid concrete or wet paste, for example, by use of shotcrete. Shotcrete is being shoot out of the equipment, so there is a what additional impact force, okay, or fluid pressure, okay, that is being introduced. So rate of placement really has an additional effect. Okay? So that's for the pressure. How about the weight? Of course, horizontal forms are designed to hold weight. Okay? The design weight is determined by these factors: the depth of the concrete, the unit weight of the concrete. Now, we will talk a lot about unit weight of the concrete. There are several recipes, several type of mixture, several ratio of the components, and therefore, as a result, we will have different unit weights. So we have a standard. We will follow the standard when we are solving problems for the purpose of that board exam. But in real life, we have to take the unit weight of the actual paste or concrete. And lastly, the amount of reinforcement. Of course, the more the reinforcement, the greater the weight the component would be. What is the pressure capacity or manufactured forms? Okay? Manufactured forms, these are because Formworks and Falseworks are costly, they actually manufacture the Formworks currently in order for these Formworks to be reusable for reuse, because the cost will be divided. For example, you can have a Formworks that could be reused 3 times. So the cost would be divided by 3. Okay? For example, the original price of the formwork for the whole building sometimes is actually about 30% to 40% of the total cost of concrete itself. And 30% is a big cost. So if you can reuse for example, the formworks 3 times, so 30% divide 3, so 10% is actually acceptable. Okay, is more than acceptable. Job built forms. It is designed according to specification. Is it constructed according to the design? Of course. Okay, so depending upon the size and shape, particularly when the architect, which do not concern itself with structure, the concern of architects are the beautification, the aesthetic value of the structure, and they would design what? Irregular shape, size, and therefore you are obliged to put up formworks that could somewhat become a mold for the irregular shape structure. So it says too hard, but must be done. Does it meet the project specification? So those are things that we need to answer. It must meet the project specification. Okay. Usually, in our country, they are not specified in the engineering plan. But if you take a look at engineering plan, for example, in Japan, they are specified. The specification are written down on the engineering plan. And recently, there is a movement of submission of plans or approval of plans that must have included this type of specification. So more or less, our country's standard is usually doing or using the standard of our country. That's why whatever standard they are using, we are also tend to use it, but on the delay. We are delayed in implementation of those standards. For example, it's already 30 to 40 years that those standards are being used in other countries, but we are just using it for what, 5 years, 10 years. Okay. So we are delayed. Success, is it? It is measured by how well the jello mold conforms to the owner's specification. So owner's specification must be the #1 criteria. However, in our country, the owner will not directly talk to you. There is a project management group or the general contractor or the architect itself which would talk to you. So if you are the contractor for the subcon for what structural, you have to do this to conform to the expectation. Is it the right shape? Of course, the architect should know this. So we are going to base our Falseworks on what architectural view, architectural plan. Are length, height, and width correct? So not only aesthetic, but some sort of what dimensional accuracy. Our accuracy is about what 0.5 inch. So that is not a good accuracy, but in our discipline, that is great. That is acceptable. It is tolerated in our discipline. It is within the right location. So those things. So there are so many variables and factors that are in play when we are planning for Formworks and Falseworks. That's why it is an additional job. It is a preparatory job, but still necessary and costly. So take note, 30 to 40%. Okay, so perfect wall, as you can see. You can see by not doing it right. Do you know how hard it is to correct if the concrete already hardens? So what will you do? To correct this, you have to what? To assign labor workforce into this for correcting or take note. There is what a very noticeable uneven surface. So uneven surface, we have a blemish on the surface. So blemishes and uneven, bad joint. So these are additional job actually. So a bad Formworks will get you into trouble actually. So instead of paying an additional man-hour for correction, so that is supposed to be the contractor's what? Contractor's income, okay? Profit, but you have to pay for the labor in order just to correct. So what to do? Very hard to what? You need manpower, you need man-hours to correct these things. Okay? Imagine this, if the owner will not receive this. Okay? So that's why currently, even in our country, the high-rise building, the big projects, they will use a very expensive Formworks. Okay? They will use a very expensive Formworks that could be reused later on. What do you mean by very expensive? The surface of the Formwork is so flat that after drying of the concrete, what we left is a very good flat and have a good quality surface. Okay, so that is the reason why they are using a very expensive Formworks toilet. Okay, so is the concrete being placed properly? So you can see. Can you have an opinion about this? Okay, is the concrete being placed properly? So we have a formwork and the concrete have to be placed here, no? Here. Okay. Okay, so here. This is a top view or diagonal or bird's eye view. They are looking at the workers that are preparing the formworks for concrete placing. So falsework is used to support fresh concrete in the jello mold it is in. Okay, falsework is also used to support other structures such as precast girders, steel girders, and existing bridges. So prefabricated parts. So precast parts, meaning they are constructed, they are manufactured in the factory and they will be delivered to the site. After delivering to the site, you still need to set up falsework. That is now called falsework. Although it is part of the formwork, but this is specifically called falsework. Okay? Usually bridges are the general application of that. So, bridge column, bridge post, girders. Okay? Girders are usually manufactured in the factory. Stringers, okay, stringers, cords. So those are being manufactured usually in the factory and delivered to the site. And generally, the columns will be casted in situ, on site. Falsework supporting pair cup formwork. Okay. So this is the pair cup. This is what we call pair cup. So this is pair, this is a pair. So unlike the type of pair that we are familiar with in our country, this is what we call pair when we are talking of civil engineering. This is the pair. This is a pair cup. Okay. So currently you are observing in your monitor, you have what? The vertical and horizontal formworks that will support the making of pier. Okay, so let us go to the next slide. Falsework supporting precast. So these are the falsework, this part. This is the falsework. Okay. And those in direct contact with the casting of the concrete, those are called falsework. But this is precast. So if this is precast, there is no on-site concreting. There is no on-site wet concrete. So what we are doing here is to support the precast until it is connected to the other parts of the structure. Okay. So we still have to set this up. So these are what we call falsework. So formwork, what can you say about this? Usually they are called jello, wall forms, wall pressure, deck forms, wall break, falsework, formwork. So this is what we are seeing. So formworks is the one in direct contact with the concrete. Now we have a falsework underneath in order to support the formworks. What's your tolerance? So it must be acceptable. What are their qualifications? What are your qualifications? So those are qualifications, because if we miss something, or if we mess the job, you can see we will land into trouble, bigger and trouble, and it will ultimately what? Produce losses rather than profit. Okay, so these are what we need to remember when we are talking about Formworks and Falseworks. Okay, so let us go to the challenge question, problems. So we have a question here. Paint is composed of blank percent pigment and blank percent vehicles. Okay, so what can you say about this? Okay, how many percent pigment and how many percent vehicles? Okay, so letter A, 21%, pigment, 79% vehicle. Letter B, 81% pigment, 19% vehicle. Letter C, 79% pigment, 21% vehicle. And letter D, 19% pigment, 81% vehicle. Okay, so this is for a challenge question, and your answer must be put or written on the comment section below. So that's all for this video. Thank you again. This is Dr. EYPEI, always preaching engineering for nation building.